Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have an episode of This Year in Perfume, and it's going to focus on the year 1988, which is an absolutely stunning year in perfume, to me anyways. We're in my favorite decade, one of my favorite years, because there's so much to talk about. So many fragrances that I absolutely love and adore came out of the year 1988. 1981 was a fantastic year. 1980 was a fantastic year. 1978 was a fantastic year. And so, this is a year that competes with some of the best years, in my opinion. And so it's a very special year. It's a year that, I want to highlight in and of itself, in its own video. But before we hop into some of these fragrances, which are amazing, I want to talk about some things that happened in the year 1988, some current events, if you will. Well, they're not current anymore, but they were current in the year 1988. Margaret Thatcher became the longest-serving British Prime Minister of the 20th century. Floppy disks were a thing. Everyone remember floppy disks? Sorry for the shaggy hair. I'm a shaggy ram. The work from home thing is kind of making me a little bit lazy. I really should go get a haircut, and it's bothering the heck out of me. So if you see me messing with my hair, I do apologize. But soon enough, I'll get a haircut. Okay, and then what else happened? Not really. There wasn't very many events that made me just jump out and go, oh, wow, this is really something that I need to talk to you about. At least nothing that that just jumped right out and grabbed me. There were some awesome movies, though. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Who doesn't love Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Coming to America, one of my favorite comedies. Why can't they make comedies like Coming to America anymore? And don't say they made a remake of it, because the remake was not that great. But again, that's just my humble opinion. So don't get offended. If you get offended by anything what I say, you're probably on the wrong channel, to be honest with you. And then Good Morning Vietnam came out at the very end of 87, but of course it was a hit in 1988 with the late, great Robin Williams, rest in peace. Good comedians, they always have a dark side, don't they? And he was one of the best. Okay, now some of the songs. What are some that jump out to me? Never Gonna Give You Up. I won't do that again, don't worry. Man in the Mirror by Michael Jackson. Get Out of My Dreams, Get Into My Car by Billy Ocean. Great year. What else was a popular song? Kokomo by the Beach Boys. If you could go back to 1988, would you? That's my question. Would you go back to 1988 if you could? Because I absolutely would if they would let me. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the fragrances, which is why you're here. And before we jump into the year of 1988, we're going to do a scent of the day, which is common for my channel if you've watched some of my other videos. Scent of the day is going to be Green Irish Tweed. And the reason that it's Green Irish Tweed today is it is March 1st today. And that's the date that Rich Mitch randomly chose. He could have chose the 21st and made it the solstice or equinox or whatever it is, where the season officially turns to spring, but he randomly made it on March 1st. And so what this is, oh man, look at these old fire hose sprayers on the Creeds. Did you see that? It's just like fragrance. Okay, so there's a fresh spray for you guys. Pierre Bourdon. Actually, it's funny because if you look on Parfumo, it doesn't list Olivier Creed as the perfumer. It lists Pierre Bourdon, which Fragrantica needs to hurry up and get with the times and switch the perfumer to Pierre Bourdon. Because he was the one that made this, not Olivier Creed. Olivier Creed is not a perfumer, damn it. It is such a, this is a vintage 2014 batch. The way that you can tell is if you look right here, if it would focus. Maybe it's not going to do it. Maybe I won't be able to show you. Ah, there we go. Okay, so you see that 14A01? The 14 before the A01 indicates the year. So this is a 2014 batch. At the end of 2014, they did away with the fire hose sprayers. So the A, obviously there's 114, A01, you know, B01. They do all kind of things like that. But as the year goes on, the letters go on. So A is early in the year, and you know, if it was Z01, it was towards the end of the year. So the earlier 2014 batches still have the old fire hose sprayers, which I absolutely love. And so this is spring in a bottle for me, because you know what it reminds me of? And I can never shake this association. Gladiator is actually one of my favorite movies of all time. And there's a scene where, you know, he is injured and he's thinking of, you know, he's thinking of his family and he's thinking of his version of heaven. And he takes his hand as he's walking and he like brushes this golden wheat looking plant as he's walking, you know, in this open field, and his hand is brushing this plant or whatever, and the sun is shining, and you know, you see the plants up close just kind of going off of his hand, and he's just kind of, you know, slowly touching the plants as he's walking. I get that image from Green Irish Tweed for some reason. But basically what this is this is a fresh lemon. You get this lemon verbena type smell in the opening with peppermint, and then there's one of the most beautiful irises in a fresh fragrance. I usually like irises done in the way of something like Dior Homme, Valentino Uomo Intense, you know, stuff like that. But the iris here just complements the freshness, and it says Florentine iris, so it's some of the best iris in the world, with real ambergris in these older bottles. If you can find a 4 ounce or a 2.5 ounce, so that's 125 ml or a 75 ml. Those were the bottle sizes Creed used to make before the 2017 flip to 50 and 100. And the reasoning that they gave was crap. They were like, well, you know, then you can carry it on a plane and not have to, you know, decant it or something, and it just fits nicer in the pocket. Come on. You know, they cut out 25 mLs of juice both ways. And so they effectively did a price hike without actually raising the prices, because they left the prices the same and gave you less juice. And I feel they also did reformulations. And so these older bottles especially just have more pop. You know, Creeds are not known for, you know, they're not known for their longevity, basically, right? You know, you have to kind of respray. But I'll tell you what, it's noon, and I sprayed this at 8 on my left hand, and you just saw me do a fresh spray here. And this is still radiating beautifully 4 hours later. It's such a... It's just so pleasant, so professional. This is a fantastic office scent. You get this beautiful Creed sandalwood, which they used to do so well in their older batches with ambergris, and it feels like real ambergris. And that was the thing about Olivier Creed, is he wasn't a perfumer, obviously. And so he didn't really know how to cut costs and save money. So what he did is he just said, I'll use the best ingredients possible and charge a heck of a lot of money. No one was charging, this came out in 1985. No one was charging hundreds of dollars for a perfume. You know, there was almost nothing like this out there. There was Annick Goutal, that was a niche brand that was pretty popular back then. But popular is, you know, it is... it's kind of, you have to take that into context, because there was no internet. In order to go buy an Annick Goutal, you had to go to Paris or have someone bring it back for you or something like that. You had to be in the know. And so, you know, this coming out in 85, I prefer this over Cool Water, which leads us into a segue of some fragrances that you will not see on this channel from 1988. I don't own a bottle of Cool Water because I have this. And they are the same perfumer. It's interesting, you know, if you go on Fragrantica, there are people arguing till the cows come home. This smells like Cool Water. Your nose is broken. You're an idiot. This doesn't smell anything like Cool Water. 99% of them don't know it's the same perfumer, obviously. Is there a link to Cool Water? Absolutely. Do they smell the same? No. To my nose, they don't, because the material quality in this is so much better. Now, to the average Joe, is it worth paying? I saw a bottle of a older batch of this, a 2017 batch, so 3 years older than my bottle, on eBay for $700 for a 4 ounce, and it wasn't even full. It was like 80% full or something. So these bottles new are pushing $1,000 now on eBay. It's insane. Is it worth paying $1,000 versus, you know, paying $60 for Cool Water for the average person? You know, the average person might not care that much, but for us, the people in the know, for me, I'd just rather go with GIT. So you won't see Cool Water. You won't see Eternity by Calvin Klein. You won't see New West for him by Aramis. You won't see Gucci Nobile. That's one I would love to have. Gucci Nobile is supposedly one of the best fougere fragrances money can buy. I don't have it. You won't see Eau de Hadrian from Annick Goutal. I don't have it. So as you can see, there's a lot of fragrances from 1988 that you will not find on this list, but there's a lot that you will. And so let's get into the ones that you will find, and let's start with the decants first. So we're gonna actually begin with a Maître Parfume, a Gantier fragrance, and that's called Ombre Presto. Now, Ombre Presto is one of the best amber fragrances that money can buy. It just is. You know, if you're just a fan of an out-and-out amber, I would take this over Grand Soir any day of the week, and twice on Sunday. Again, my personal opinion, this is a amber with some oriental qualities. It opens up with this lavender and myrtle feel, and the lavender makes it feel a little bit more masculine than your average amber fragrance to me. There's also coumarin, vanilla, nutmeg, labdanum, Peru balsam, Tolu balsam, and ambergris. So you can see it's a very resinous, warm, enveloping, somewhat spicy, but also just very classic amber. You know, that's the word that comes to mind for me. It's very classic. It's you know, it's not trying to reinvent the wheel. It's not trying to do something, you know, completely extraordinary. It's just a fantastic amber. Jean Laporte created this, by the way. And, you know, this is one where, would I like a full bottle? Sure. Would I like a full bottle at the current prices? Especially since this was pulled from an older ruby bottle. So the new bottles are clear with, like, you know, yellowish, orangish juice. The older bottles were like ruby red. This was pulled from one of the ruby red bottles. And, you know, for me, 10 ml is enough. I get the urge to wear an amber fragrance probably like once a month in the winter. And I usually don't wear these kind of fragrances in the summer. So for me, it's like, you know, a 10 ml decant fills the void, let's say, inside of me. Okay, next, we're going to go to a fragrance that was a bit of a letdown for me, but not because it's a bad fragrance, because it's just not my type of fragrance, if that makes sense. And this is a fragrance from the house of Benetton, and it's called Colors de Benetin Man. Now, I've got 2 of these little 15 ml splashes, and I'll give it some full wears this summer, this spring and summer. And this is a discontinued fragrance. Copyright Benetton Cosmetics Corp, New York, New York. Okay, so it's a 15 ml. And this is basically a very fresh, again, there's lavender. That was very popular back then. There's some citruses with green facets like bergamot, lemon. There's cypress, which adds to that greenness. Cyclamen, carnation, rose, and jasmine. So there is a touch of florals, but it's really focusing on the citrus. It's very citrus heavy. It's very fresh. Women probably loved this fragrance on men back in the 80s because historically women like fresh smelling scents on their men. They don't like, these very, if you think this very complex, resinous, deep fragrance is going to get you compliments by a woman, normally it's not. Now for me, I don't care about compliments. I'm wearing fragrances, I'm enjoying fragrances for myself, and if I happen to get a compliment, I always take it graciously, and I say thank you and pretty much try and move on. It usually doesn't matter to me. It's always nice for somebody to say something, but it's not why I wear a fragrance. If you wear fragrances for compliments, you're probably, one, wearing it for the wrong reason, and two, you're definitely on the wrong channel, because that's not what I'm about. I'm more about fragrance as an art form. So, if you've already watched some of the other fragrance channels like Jeremy Fragrance, and now you want to move on to something a little bit deeper, I think that's the content that I can provide some value. There are some heavier notes underneath Colors de Benetin Man. Like, for example, there is patchouli, there's vanilla, there's cedar and sandalwood and amber and benzoin, but those are very dialed back. It's not about, this is not a patchouli scent, I would say. It's not like you're going to wear, it's not like wearing Psychedelic or Krizia Moods Uomo. No, this is trying to be kind of like a more modern take on a citrus fragrance, in my opinion. But I'll give it more wears this summer and report back. Okay, now we're gonna jump into the full bottles, and we're gonna start with one that is a little bit of a it's a little bit of a how would you call it? Almost like a fragrance that was issued long ago, but they did kind of a reinvention in the year 1988. And it's a fragrance for women, and one of the most classical fragrances for women of all time. It actually came out in the early 20s. I want to say it just celebrated its 100th year anniversary as well. And that is a fragrance by the House of Molinard, and it's called Habanita. Now, this is the EDT. The EDT was relaunched in 1988 after the fragrance being basically dead, gone. I don't know what they would call it. Maybe vaulted or something for years. And this is one of the best amber fragrances money can buy. These two are some amazing ambers. Now, again, this came out 100 years ago, but the current version of the EDT, which is now sadly discontinued, this is discontinued, unfortunately. You can still buy the Eau de Parfum, but you can't buy the EDT anymore. And what this is a fragrance that was made initially when women were kind of going through their freedom movement, if you will. So it had, the idea of a woman being out in a bar, smoking a cigarette, which proper women were not supposed to do. They were not supposed to smoke, and they were not supposed to wear their dresses above their knees, and they were not supposed to show their hair and all that crazy stuff that was going on back then, right? So this was coming out right at the forefront of the woman's I don't know what to call it other than freedom movement. I'm sure it has a name, but forgive my ignorance. This was done by a perfumer called Rory Bertrand, and I'm pretty sure that Rory just did the reformulation of this. So the original was done by somebody else. But this basically starts out with this very green, almost like sticky, ambery smell, and it smells like amber mixed with tobacco. And there's no tobacco note listed in this fragrance. But when Habanita originally came out, what was interesting about this fragrance is they actually targeted it towards women who would they would actually spray their cigarettes that they smoked with it. And it was supposed to kind of help this, it was supposed to give off this fragrant smell when a woman smoked a cigarette. So you could see back then how cautious and careful and meticulous women had to be if they were supposed to do an activity like smoking, which they were not supposed to do. It's almost like they hid it in a way. They covered it up with something perfumey, right? Crazy story, I know. But the original version, I've never compared them, but from my understanding, I think it was supposed to be more fruity, and it was supposed to be a little bit more harsh with that tobacco note. This, I think, tones back some of that fruit, but you still get this fruity, almost like, you almost get this like Rosia Dove violet accord to my nose. And again, that's another note that's not listed, but you get this purple. I think of purple when I wear this fragrance for some reason. You get this purple, like violet heliotrope thing going on, and then it mixes with the rose centifolia. There's vetiver in this. That's why I say this is a very masculine. Those older fragrances from the 20s, like Habanita, Shalimar, L'air Bleu from a decade before, they can be very masculine fragrances sometimes. Sometimes they're kind of shapeshifters. And so if you're a man, do not overlook this. Habanita is one of the, if you're someone like me that likes to collect the classics because you want to reference and you want to study the perfume, you have to have Habanita. I prefer the EDT, even though it's discontinued. And even the EDT is a very heavy fragrance. So it's a very gutsy fragrance. It's very, it's cutting edge, if you will. Even though it was released 100 years, it feels cutting edge. And the vanilla and the amber, and there is patchouli as well to round it off. And it feels like there's a big slug of oak moss in this. Now, I'm sure the current EDP has been reformulated. Maybe the patchouli has been amped up, or the vetiver has been amped up to take the place of the oak moss that's had to be turned down. But I just get this it's a beautiful fragrance. Most guys, if they've never worn a woman's fragrance, probably for the first hour, because it does change a lot in the first hour too. This is a complex fragrance. So if you're a guy and you've never worn Shalimar, or you've never worn L'air Bleu, or those kind of fragrances that are targeted towards women, you might struggle the first time you wear this, but don't give up. Stick with it. Give it a couple full wears, and I would say you will fall in love with this fragrance, especially if you're a lover of complex perfumery. This does some amazing things. I'll do a full review on this one day, but Habanita is one that, if you don't know about it, you should definitely put it on your to sniff list. Okay. Now we're going to go from a feminine targeted fragrance to a masculine targeted fragrance. And this was highlighted in my Perfumers Portfolio video when we talked about master perfumer Olivier Cresp. And this is a fragrance called Ascencia. Now, someone mentioned that this is a newer bottle, and it is a newer bottle in a sense. It's not a true vintage. But it's not the newest formulation. They've actually started to put these Ascencia fragrances in the standard square bottle that 001 Man comes in. So if you look up Loewe 001 Man, you'll see that very almost like the Guerlain Listerine bottle is what it feels like, but Loewe's version of that, that's what they're starting to put this in. So this isn't the oldest, but it isn't the newest formulation either. I believe this is before Loewe was purchased by LVMH, if I'm not mistaken. Perfumes Loewe SA. And this is a scent that some people compare to Polo Green, and I understand what they're saying. It came out a decade after Polo Green. There's a huge basil note in this. By the way, one of my subscribers, Ben, asked me to do this is not a top 10 on basil, and I'm going to accommodate that request. There are so many fragrances that utilize the note of basil, especially in the 80s, to give this green effect with some depth to the green notes instead of just having, you know, tarragon and galbanum are probably the other two green notes people think of. But basil is a very important note, and so I will accommodate that request, Ben. It's going to come soon, probably this weekend. But this is a fougere to me. It feels like a fougere, whereas Polo Green feels more like a chiffre. There's also tobacco listed in Polo Green, which this does not have a tobacco note, although sometimes you do get a hint. It feels like there could be tobacco in there, but it's more about, I think, the pine, the basil, the tarragon and galbanum. There is some freshness because there's juniper and petitgrain. There's some florals like geranium, jasmine, lily of the valley, neroli, pine needles, rose, clary sage. So you get the feel. It's that 80s aromatic fougere, but it's done very, very well. Longevity is not insane, maybe because it's not a true vintage. But I still get a solid 6 to 8 hours. This would give you probably a work day, but I reapply usually around the 6-hour mark. I just reapply it. So for me, whatever, I'll just put it on a couple times. But if you're a lover of those kind of old school 80s perfumes, this is one that's kind of like considered a holy grail. It's kind of considered a, you know, one of those old fragrances with a huge dose of oak moss. Fragrances that I love, basically. I love vintage masculines. Love it. And this is when Olivier Cresp's star really started to shine brightly, you could say. It really took off with this, and then his reformulation of Rochas Femme in 1989. Okay, now we're going to go back to another woman's targeted fragrance. And I think this is the last woman's targeted fragrance on the list. But this is a fragrance by the house of Estee Lauder, and this is called Knowing. And if you're a chiffre fan, especially if you're a floral chiffre fan, you have to get your nose on Knowing. Knowing it's not my favorite Estee Lauder for women. That would be Azure Pure Parfum Spray. But this is a beautiful floral chiffre. It is, it has a mimosa and rose with this very fruity aspect. So it feels like maybe there is, you know, nectarine and plum and stuff like that. Very, very thick. I mean, look at the color of the juice. The fragrance feels like the color of the juice. It feels very dense. You know, the tuberose feels very narcotic in here. There's beautiful jasmine, which can sometimes feel a bit indolic, but never too much. It's never overdone. You know, that's the thing about indolic jasmine. Sometimes it can feel like it's punching you in the face. And I don't get that with this fragrance. There's orange blossom, which again, that's a very expensive note. And all the ingredients here feel very high quality. And then the base is patchouli, oak moss, sandalwood, vetiver, and amber. But the tuberose and plum, there's another tuberose and fruity fragrance from the 1980s called Poison that was hugely popular. So this kind of came out in Poison Shadow, but it does its own thing. It stands on its own legs, if you will. And so I've got a bottle. I don't know how to really, honestly, I don't know how to really date these old Knowing bottles, but I guess the less info on the tag, probably the better. Okay, next we're gonna go on to a fragrance that I have 600 milliliters of because I scored 5 bottles from Fragrance X or Fragrance Net or one of them for $27 a bottle, which is an absolute steal. People are selling them on eBay for 70, 80, 90, 100. And this is a fragrance by the house of Jacques Bogart, and it's called Furyo. My God, what can I say about Furyo? It's one of my favorite animalic fragrances to wear. I can say that. I can say that it's one of the few fragrances that I would put in my favorite animalic fragrances bucket. You know, like if you said, go pick out your favorite animalics to wear, Ramsey, I would probably pick this. Of course, Kouros, vintage Kouros, and of course, vintage Antaeus. You know, they would all be in that bucket. So you can see the company that Furyo keeps are some of my favorite fragrances of all time. And even though the civet here feels a little bit more synthetic, the opening is very harsh. The first 5 seconds, you know, you're going to think, my God, what did I just put on my body? I mean, you're going, and you have to wear this on skin. Do not spray your clothes. Wear this on skin. Do the inside of your collarbones like I do right here, and then do the top of your hands or the inside of your elbow or something like that. But it has to be on skin. And there's a beautiful ambrette note here. Ambrette is not a cheap ingredient either. Even Roja, you know, talks about how ambrette's such an expensive material to use. It's a replacement for musk, basically, but it's the only natural replacement for musk that perfumers have other than real musk, which they can't use. So they use ambrette. It's a seed from a plant. And then there's coriander, there's bergamot, there's lavender, there's carnation, there's geranium. So even though it's dirty, it has that dirty, you know, fresh thing going on, which I love. There's jasmine and thyme and cinnamon, amber, oak moss, musk, patchouli, vanilla, vetiver, and civet. Amazing animalic fragrance. Probably my favorite from the house of Jacques Bogart. And, you know, 600 mLs, I would still buy another bottle. So, you know, it's that good. If I get a great deal, I would even buy more because it's such a great fragrance. Even this more modern bottle, if you will, I don't know how to really date these, but I'm guessing this isn't a true vintage. I think the discontinuation happened about a decade ago. So I think it went from about 1988 to 2008. So I know all the bottles are somewhat older, but there's probably bottles that are even older than this. But still, I love this fragrance. And it was done by Ron Winograd and Thierry Vassar, two all-star, rock-star fragrance producers in my book. Two rock-star perfumers. Okay. So now we go to the complete other end of the spectrum. So Furyo is probably a fragrance that most people wouldn't wear to work. You know, it's complex and it's challenging and it might even offend people. To me, this is the opposite of that. It's still an 80s fragrance. It still has depth. I still love the way it performs on my skin and all that good stuff. But it's the opposite end of the spectrum. This is very wearable anytime, any place. I usually wear this in spring and summer just because I like wearing other things in the winter. But this is YSL's Jazz in the vintage old white and black keyboard bottle. And I have a backup of this. This is a 50 ml, and I have a 100 ml that Anuj found me. Anuj, thank you, sir. And this is basically, I don't hear anyone else say this, so maybe my nose is nuts. But this is almost like a grandfather or a father of Guerlain's Heritage, which is my favorite masculine fragrance Jean-Paul Guerlain ever did. I like Heritage even more than Abbey Rouge, and I love vintage Abbey Rouge. It has that, you know, that leather note that comes in the vintage, in the dry down, that's so elegant, you know, it's so upper class. And this is the same. This, Heritage, and Escada's Pour Homme are the three that I would put into the bubble of this type of fragrance for me. There's probably others, but for me, it's those three. And I just feel so comfortable. You know, that's the word that comes to mind, comfort. I feel so comfortable wearing this fragrance. It's a fragrance that will hint at some, how can I say this? Some of the notes will seem somewhat familiar to you. Like you'll get this aniseed, you'll get this anise blast in the opening, but it quickly goes away. And then you'll get lavender, you'll get spicy nutmeg and cinnamon and cardamom. So there's the spicy trifecta right there. Nutmeg, cardamom, cinnamon. And then you get this beautiful floral heart, gorgeous carnation. The old school carnation in this is just mind-blowingly beautiful. Geranium, iris, jasmine, and then the base is amber, oak moss, leather, musk, sandalwood, cedar, tobacco, and tonka. I don't know if you could have a better base. I mean, that's everything right there. And it just blends together into this, you know, almost like this perfectly wearable masculine scent. This is masculine all the way. Again, there are, you know, some people say anyone can wear anything they want, and I agree with that. If you're a woman and you want to wear this, knock yourself out. But for me, maybe because of the time I was born, you know, maybe because when I was a kid, this is what men smell like, but this is what a man should smell like to me, to my nose, and to my way of thinking. It's made for a man's body, in my opinion. You know, it mixes with a man's scent and just projects this beautiful confidence. This is just this and Heritage and Escada Pour Homme are just liquid confidence to me. You know, it smells like, at least to me, other people might think I'm nuts, but when I wear this, it smells like liquid confidence. Like, you know, I own the room. They could be wearing a $2,000 Roja, and I feel like I still own the room wearing this. Again, that's just me. I love that fragrance. There's also some flankers that I'll talk about in the summer. There's Live Jazz, which Pierre Bourdon did, and there's Jazz Prestige, which says it has real Mysore sandalwood on the back. I have a tester bottle, or the box says it, or something. I'll show you. Once I get to reviewing individual fragrances, I'll show you. But if you're into real Mysore sandalwood, hunt down a bottle of Jazz Prestige if you can. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about a fragrance that I would consider a fantastic alternative for vintage Antaeus. If you can't get your nose, or if you just can't find vintage Antaeus and you want an idea, you know, you don't want, it's not vintage Antaeus. The only thing that's vintage Antaeus is vintage Antaeus, okay? I can't stress that enough, but this will get you in the ballpark. And this is a fragrance that was created by master perfumer Dominique Ropillon, big name in the fragrance game. And this is called Maxim's Pour Homme. And again, this is a 1988 release, or it wouldn't be here. I didn't bring out all my backups because it was too many, but these were easy to grab, so I grabbed them. And Maxim's Pour Homme, to my nose, is a more floral take on the Antaeus DNA. So you get that leather. You know, Antaeus has that patented leather that they created out of God knows what sort of beautiful ingredients, probably labdanum and castoreum, which is my favorite way to create leather, not the modern synthetic materials they use, but the old school leather. My favorite type of leather that I just drool over. This has that. And it also has a huge dose of oak moss in the base, and there is an old school lavender in the opening. What it's missing is it's missing the myrrh, and it's missing the thyme and sage that Antaeus has, but it has this beautiful floral that Dominique Ropillon amped up a little bit, and it's done to perfection. And so what they did is they used carnation. To my nose, it smells like there's this carnation, rose, and jasmine thing going on. Now, rose is not a listed note, but rose is a listed note in Antaeus, and is a beautiful rose in Antaeus. Here it's carnation and jasmine and lavender. And so if there is no rose, it's either my nose picking up this phantom rose because I associate this scent with Antaeus in some way, or there's just a rose in the background and it's not listed on Parfumo. So, and again, all of these dates I'm going off of Parfumo, so keep that in mind. If Fragrantica says something different, please don't attack me. I'm going off of Parfumo's dates. But if you are somebody who's starting a new collection and maybe you're really depressed, you can't find these old Antaeus. You can't find old Kouros without selling a kidney, you know, stuff like that. Go buy this. This is still readily available, even though it's discontinued. It's still readily available, and it is, it's not expensive. I think I paid $40 for this bottle. One of them I got from Le Parfumeur, I think. And one of them I think I might have gotten from Anuj. I can't remember which one's which. But there is a distributor sticker on one. There isn't on the other. There you go. Distributed by Gary Farn Limited. I have no clue what that means. But I will tell you that as a lover of vintage masculines, this is one that gets highly overlooked. So there you go. I can't stress that enough. All right, let's go to the other side of the table now. And we're going to go to a fragrance that I actually don't think is very well balanced for a 1988 fragrance. Most fragrances, I think, are beautifully balanced. This one, I feel like the cinnamon and the cumin is amped up a little bit more than I want it for whatever reason. It's supposed to be this spicy Chypre fragrance, and I love Chypres. They're one of my favorite category of fragrances. This, even though it's a vintage, even though the bottle that I have is one of the ones that, you know, only has 3 ingredients listed, all that good stuff. Something about it I struggle with. I'll continue to wear it. I'm not going to give up on it. But this is one I definitely would not go out and buy a backup bottle of. And this is a fragrance by the house of Antonio Puig. And this is called Cyberus. There you go, right there. Cyberus. And Cyberus was created by Rosendo Matu and Alberto Morillas. There's a name that, you know, you probably know well. He's probably the most published perfumer in these databases. He's done thousands of perfumes. But this is back in his early days, within the first decade or so, decade and a half of his working life. Now he's been doing it for 30, 40 years, whatever it is. But this uses this aldehydic top with cumin, and big cinnamon to my nose. Huge cinnamon. Even though cinnamon is actually not listed as a note, I get a gigantic dash of cinnamon in this. And there's basil, there's aldehydes, there's mandarin orange, there's lemon, there's artemisia, there's geranium, carnation, sandalwood, juniper. Oh, there is cinnamon. There you go. I missed it. So there is cinnamon listed with amber and leather and moss and patchouli and vetiver and frankincense. So if you read that, you would think I would love this fragrance, but I don't. For whatever reason, it just rubs me wrong. But I'll continue to wear it, and there are fragrances that take time to grow on you, and this is a bit of a complex scent. They used to make complex fragrances back then. But I think my favorite from the house of Puig would still be Quorum. Okay, now we're going to go to another vintage cheapie, but you have to get the right version. If you get the wrong version, you will be very disappointed. And this is a fragrance called Rapport. And the version that you want is the version that says Shulton on the back. Shulton made Old Spice fragrances before they were purchased by Procter & Gamble. And this scent came out in 1988, of course. It's still available, but it's being produced by Eden Classics. And Eden Classics absolutely butchered the reformulation. Butchered it. One of the worst reformulations of all time, up there with Perry Ellis for Men. They did Perry Ellis Cologne for Men was the original one. That's the good one. Perry Ellis for Men, the EDT, is the worst reformulation I've ever smelled. But this takes a little bit of this, you know, imagine if you just took a dash of Kouros and mixed it with this green, spicy geranium note. So geranium can sometimes feel rosy and it can sometimes feel fresh. And this gives off some aspects of both. So you get a little bit of this rosy feel from the geranium, almost like the rose in Antaeus that just kind of creeps up on you, right? You get a little bit of that in the background, but then you get this clean, almost like this soap aspect with moss and what they call exotic woods. I have no clue what that means. Probably a mixture of sandalwood and, you know, some other woods, Gaiac wood or whatever it is. And then musk, big dose of musk. So the main notes here are musk, geranium, and maybe some patchouli. And some oak moss, especially in the old one. The old one, of course, has the oak moss turned up. So if you can find this Shulton version, and if you can find it for cheap, and you probably will be able to find it for cheap. This is a cheap fragrance. The vintage is worth getting. The modern, don't even bother. Just honestly, don't bother with it. But this is one that I would easily wear in the spring and summer, even though it has some filth, some dirt to it. It has a little bit of that animalic growl. It's still fresh enough and clean enough. You know, the musks are very clean musks to me. And so that's kind of a real under the radar. I don't think I've shown this before. But 1988 Rapport, I have no clue who the perfumer is. Okay, these last three are Hall of Fame fragrances in my book. Literally Hall of Fame. The first one is my favorite Italian leather fragrance. I even like it more than Fendi Womo, which you guys saw me show off a couple days ago as my scent of the day. This is called Fendi Uomo. Look at this bottle. It just, boom, just sits there like a boss. I mean, look at it with the marble looking in gold. It's so 80s. Like you would just wear it as a gold chain, you know? And so the splash bottles had this little line here in the center go, I'm not flipping you off, I'm showing you, go up and down, okay? So it went up and down instead of vertical. So that's an easy way to tell. If it's up and down, it's splash. If it's vertical, it's spray. And mine is a SPA Firenze version, and I can tell you I love it. Other people say they have Bethco versions and they love it. I don't know, you know, which one came first, to be honest with you. It's been a bit of a debate in the fragrance community with friends. But I can tell you this. This scent is amazing. It's like, to me, this, obviously it came out in 88, and it is a scent that is almost a bit like if you took Bel Ami, which is my favorite leather fragrance, and you Italianed it up. You gave it a little bit of, you know, hey, oh. Don't ask me why the Italian guy was from New York. Hey, oh, but he was. But you Italianed it up, you know, a little gushpa. And this is what you get out of this. You get this opening that smells like, you know, you just took spices from your grandmother's cupboard that's been there for 30 years. Allspice and cumin and sage and bay leaves and all this stuff. Marjoram, angelica, coriander. I mean, anything you can think of, and just threw it in the pot. And then, after that, you mixed in this iris and leather, which iris and leather are turning into a pure love for me. And I think that the leather here is built off of the leather accord that I love. I think there's castoreum in here, and I think there's maybe a bit of labdanum and patchouli, and there's a touch of vanilla, but it's not sweet. It stays very Italian. The opening is very aromatic, and once it hits that oily leather dry down, it's just heaven. I absolutely love this fragrance. This and Fendi Womo are my two favorite Italian leather fragrances, but if you made me pick, I would take this. This came out in 88. Fendi Womo came out in 83. So Fendi gets the gets the nod for originality and coming out first, but I actually prefer the Fendi. Okay, now we're going to go on to a Paco Rabanne fragrance, and this is one almost no one talks about. I have a 200 ml backup bottle I didn't want to grab. It's just too much, so I only grabbed the little baby one, but this is a 25 ml that I have of Ténéré, and I can tell you that Rudy bought this on my recommendation, and Rudy reported back and said that this is an amazing fragrance, and how come more people don't talk about it? And I said, I know, and I don't understand it. But if you like, the problem is what do you compare this to? It's a little bit like, the way that I would describe this, and you have to know fragrances to understand this or it won't make sense, but the way that I would describe it is if you took Alain Delon's Iquitos, mixed it with Boss Number 1, mixed it with Teatro alla Scala. Think about that. If you're a fragrance lover and you understood that, that's like professor exam level right there. Add this and this and this and what comes out. And what you get is Ténéré. It is unbelievably beautiful. It's basically classified as this spicy floral scent. I just love these kind of fragrances so much. This is so me. This is so me right here. This is bold and abrasive. There's honey, which I love. There's dirtiness from something. I don't even know what. Probably civet, but there's no civet listed. There's Artemisia. There's tarragon, but then there's bergamot. There's cassia. There's grapefruit. There's rosemary. There's lavender. There's lemon. There's carnation. There's orris. I love the powdery orris. There's some beautiful florals in here. One of the most beautiful floral fragrances Paco Rabanne ever made. There's lily of the valley and rose and amber and leather and musk and patchouli and vetiver and cedar. So you get the idea. But that's the best way I can describe it. Alain Delon's floral notes from Iquitos, which came out in a similar time frame, by the way, the 80s. And then you go to Boss Number 1 with the honey. And then you go to Teatro alla Scala with this deep, dry, Teatro alla Scala has this, everything's like turned up to an 11. And that's what this is. This is heavy juice, heavy. There's one subscriber to my channel that always asks me, is it beast mode? This is beast mode. This is an absolute beast. Now, this is a splash, so I have to decant it. But I've shown you guys before, so what? Get your tools, decant it, put it in a little decanter, label it, spray away, and refill it when you're done. This 25 ml bottle I got for like $35 or something. I had to pay a little bit more for my 200 ml bottle, but I don't see any other 200 ml bottles for sale, none. So I'm so happy to have this and a backup, and I will be wearing the piss out of this in the spring. Okay, now we go to the star, the rock star of the 1988 year. And if you know fragrances, you know what's coming. It is one of the greatest fragrances of all time. Greggy Boy from the Greggy Boy 76 channel says this is an 11 out of 10. Right? And I would be hard pressed to argue with him. Maybe it's not an 11 out of 10 for me. Maybe it's a 10 out of 10. But it's still, I have other fragrances I would consider an 11 out of 10. But it is Fahrenheit, the original, the OG from 1988. Now this is a 1996 bottle. You can tell by the 6 right there and the date or the address listed. So you can see Christian Dior. This is a 2014 bottle. And you can tell by the 4 right now. Right now. Right now. Well, I'll take my word for it. It's 4TO2. And, you know, Francois Demachy gets a lot of crap, and rightly so. Go watch my this Perfumer's portfolio video with Francois Demachy, and you will understand more about him as a man and perfumer and chemist and all that stuff. But he kept Fahrenheit. It's a 200 ml. So happy to have. This is a 50 ml that my old man gave me. Actually, the only fragrance in my collection I did not buy with my own money right now. How about that? Only full bottle. I've been sent a lot of samples from you kind, generous friends. But my old man gave me this. He goes, hey, I bought this old bottle decades ago. It just sits in my drawer. Do you want it? And I was like, yeah, I think I want it. And, you know, I tried to contain myself, but when he came over, I was like, give me that. Oh yeah, it's so good. Look at the atomizer. There's no collar. It's just naked atomizer. But the difference is that the opening, and they've done a good job. Francois Demachy did a good job keeping this fragrance alive. At some point, Fahrenheit kind of lost its way. It didn't have that gasoline opening that everyone loves so much, and he brought it back starting in these 2014 bottles. 2014 to 2018, I would say, are good years, and I feel like he used some sort of spiciness, some sort of, the opening, you still get that gasoline vibe, that violet leaf accord that this is so known for. This is a Jean-Louis Suizac creation, which I love that guy. He's created some absolute bangers. I think he did Opium and a bunch of other amazing things. And Maurice Roger created this together. And, this does have lavender in it, so it has that old school lavender, but I love it. It's got nutmeg, sandalwood. There's some floral aspects that go along with the violet leaf, like carnation and honeysuckle and jasmine, which honeysuckle is a rare note in a masculine perfume, but it's the leather in the base. The leather it's to die for. I mean, one of the best designer fragrances of all time. The advertising is perfect. Fahrenheit, the box, the Burning Planet box was a revelation. This from light to dark, almost like it's on fire bottle is one of the most iconic bottles of all time. And look at the differences in the cap. You can see these older style caps, by the way. That's what you want if you can get a vintage, but don't pay $1,000 for a vintage. I mean, I guess pay $1,000 if you have money out the nose, but don't pay $1,000 if you just get a new bottle. Do what I did. I paid like $180, I think, for this 200 ml a few years ago. I don't know what they're going for now for this 2014 batch, but I will say this, and this might shock you, but I love equally wearing both of these. The vintage obviously is better. The opening is that, amazing gasoline smell. But if I run out of this, I'm not going to go buy another vintage. I'm just going to wear this 2014 bottle. And so I'm set on Fahrenheit. And thank God I am, because this is the crown jewel of the year 1988 for me. They're all great, but, I don't know, Furyo, Fendi Womo, how can you pick? Ténéré, how can you pick? Even Maxim pour Homme and Jazz are absolutely amazing. So this has had some fantastic years. We've kept our fantastic fragrances for the year 1988. We've kept it under an hour. I appreciate you watching. I appreciate your feedback. We did just hit 600 subscribers. I've told you before, I don't care about subscribers. I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it for the art and the love of fragrances, but it is always nice to see the subscriber count rise, to see the likes on the video rise. I won't ask you to do it, because when someone asks me to like a video, if I really like them, sometimes I'll do it, but sometimes I'm like, why should I? I know how to like a video. I don't need you to tell me to like a video. So anyways, if you do like it, I do appreciate that very much. I appreciate all of you watching very much, and I love seeing your faces in the comment. If there's some other fragrances from 1988 that I should look into, please let me know. And if you have thoughts on these fragrances from my collection, please let me know. Again, I love interacting with you guys. I learn more from you guys than you do from me. So cheers, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow with another video. Bye-bye.